tiny island in the Caribbean, there once lived a rat twice the size of a man. Its very existence is a nightmare and a mystery. The answer is guarded by a death trap, a murky chasm that leads into the unknown depths and unmapped past of the island of giant rats. One of the tiniest jewels in the Caribbean Sea is Anguilla. Called the Rock, it's a lump of limestone covering just 34 square miles. Its long, thin shape accounts for its name. Anguilla is Spanish for eel. But perhaps the island is named for the wrong creature. 100,000 years ago, the king of Anguilla's jungle was a rat as big as a bear. Fascinated by this prehistoric mystery, 3 fossil hunters set out to find the giant rodent called Amblerisa. Donald McFarland is a biologist from Claremont College in California.
Get the bigger bits there.
Ross McPhee is a mammologist from the American Museum of Natural History in New York. Claire Fleming is his research assistant. This is the end of a journey that began when 2 scientists each read of an ancient rodent almost 1,000 times bigger than a modern rat. Both wondered how an animal so large could thrive on an island so small, and why it finally disappeared.
There is a great deal of romance to paleontology, and to hear about a rodent that was the size of a bear interested me greatly. I had to go and find it for myself.
In the Caribbean, most fossils have been worn away by sun and rain, except those sheltered in caves. Yet if there were fossils here, the sea got to them first. A farmer suggested searching near a large pitchapple tree rooted above a damp cave. The undergrowth was overgrown, but they found the tree by its dark green leaves. Pitchapple Hole is a natural trap 70 feet deep. No one knew what lay down there, only that if a creature fell in, there was no way out. Others had come here, but none dared risk the fate of the curious. McFarland has an advantage. He not only knows caves, he knows how to climb down into them.
Oh. Okay.
Oh, it's about equally bad by rope or by ladder.
No problem.
I'll get you down.
You sure we're going to find some Amblerisa down there?
The chances are good. We didn't finish it off before.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Right?
Without an expert along, no one would try this. One slip could be fatal. If the fall didn't kill you, time would. The descent is such an ordeal that no one will go back up till the end of the day, 12 hours away. The fossil hunters are working a cold trail. The giant rat Amblerisa hasn't been tracked in half a century. Pitchapple Hole began as a cavern. For centuries, groundwater slowly hollowed out the limestone. Inevitably, the roof fell in, turning the cave into a pit and a trap.
You bringing another bucket, Don? Thanks. A little pocket of bone in here underneath all of this breakdown.
A bit deeper than the other stuff then.
Right. So it's another place where we can expect to find a few bones. Amblerisa. Clearly, these animals were in here before this roof collapsed.
Iguana.
The humidity reaches 90%, and the temperature passes 90 degrees. The cave is swarming with mosquitoes, sandflies, and the stench of bat guano. Pitchapple Hole may once have been a maze of grottos, but after the roof fell in, earth gradually heaped up, and any passages out were sealed off.
There's a tooth.
The cave is now a dead end. Within hours, the fossil hunters hit rock. Under the rock, they may find their quarry, a creature trapped down here long ago, covered over time by earth, and shielded from erosion ever since. The rocks are too heavy to lift. McFarlane will try to blast them apart. For the sake of any fossils, as well as the fossil hunters, he uses a small amount of explosive. Underneath the rock, the fossil hunters have struck pay dirt. The story of the giant rat begins with two other creatures. A century ago, phosphate was mined here for fertilizer. It was found in the guano of birds and bats. And guano was found in caves. In 1868, a Philadelphia manufacturer named Henry Waters received a shipment of phosphate from Anguilla. Amid the guano, Waters found unexpected cargo: fossils. Paleontologist Edward Drinker Cope was astounded. The bones were the remains of a rat, a 300-pound rat. Cope eventually received a hoard of bones from Anguilla. Yet he never figured out how such a large creature thrived on such a small island, or why it finally disappeared. Minutes after blasting through rock, the fossil hunters at last find what they've come for.
Oh!
Oh my God!
Head of a femur.
Put it down. And a large one too.
And this looks like it might be another piece. It's freshly removed.
Where was it?
Came out right here.
Excellent. See, we really do find things. And even Don can tell the difference between a goat and an Amblerisa.
Under the rock lay the bones of the giant rat, Amblerisa. Dozens of fossils were found, except the most important.
In the case of Amblerisa, the biggest single part we're missing is the skull. And since we only have skull bits, it's been very hard to try and piece together where Amblerisa belongs in regard to other rodents in its particular evolutionary group.
Let's consider the position of Amblerrhiza within the group known as New World rodents. They include species like the capybara, chinchilla, guinea pig, and many others. But according to the fossil evidence, we think that the line that gave rise to Amblerrhiza separated at a very early point, maybe 30 million years ago, from the other rodents.
Amblerrhiza resembled the capybara of South America, weighing up to 100 pounds. It's the largest living rodent. Like it, Amblerrhiza probably had a squarish head, a flat nose, and no tail. But Amblerrhiza was 3 times bigger. The fossil hunters never found a large bone intact, yet McPhee was able to build a plaster model of the rat based on the bones of an extinct relative and on the fragments from Cope's collection and the cave.
The most spectacular feature of this skeleton as it's now set out is the huge size of the skull, which you can see very easily, and then somewhat harder to see, perhaps, is the nature of the relationship in size between the forelimb and the hind limb. The hind limb is very massively built, implying that the animal used its hind limb to support its entire body weight.
Amblerrhiza was not only heavy, but slow. With such large hindquarters and small forelimbs, it must have lived free of predators, else nature wouldn't have let it waddle down the path of evolution, unlike its fleet-footed cousin. The fossils reveal other clues to the rat's life.
The animal probably spent a good deal of the time in postures where the weight of the animal was directed right over the lower skeleton, and that the forelimb did not support the weight, but instead was used to pull down branches and vegetation toward the mouth so that the animal could feed.
In the gardens of ancient Anguilla, Amblerrhiza may have been the only diner. Paleontologists have found no trace of other large mammals living alongside it. Nothing could stop Amblerrhiza from growing as big as it wished, except geography. An island of 34 square miles cannot support a race of 300-pound rats. There must have been more to the story, and more to the island. The inhabitants of Anguilla harvest the sea more than the land. What little grows on this Caribbean island couldn't support a huge plant eater. But 200,000 years ago, Anguilla looked like its neighbor, St. Martin. On such bounty, the giant rat Amblerrhiza thrived. Anguilla was not only greener, it was bigger, 12 times its size today. The world was gripped by an ice age, and the seas had fallen. Anguilla, St. Martin, and St. Bart's were one big island, Greater Anguilla.
The thing that drives me is to try and understand why Amblerrhiza got to the West Indian Islands in the first place.
There are 2 theories, and an advocate for each. Ross believes the rat walked across on a land bridge that later submerged as sea levels rose. Don thinks the rat drifted over on a natural raft.
Don can seemingly very easily visualize pregnant females grasping onto rafts, floating off into the sea, traveling thousands of kilometers under the hot tropical sun, pulling up on a beach, darting out and immediately having a successful life thereafter. I have a few problems with that.
Ross would take the view that rafting is a rather unlikely event, which it certainly is, although I would argue that given enough time, unlikely events happen. Ross would prefer a geological explanation in which there was some form of dry land or damp land in which the animals could have trotted over without all of their friends from South America.
And I think it's a matter of looking, probably more by geologists than paleontologists, but evidence of a land bridge to these islands from South America will one day be found. And then we'll forget about rafting. It'll become a piece of history.
Natural raft or natural bridge, the rat somehow reached the island. There it thrived, until one day it spawned a second mystery by vanishing. Back in Pitchapple Hole, more traces of more rats emerge.
There are a lot of bits in here. A marvelous claw.
Nice.
It's quite large for the animal's size and very strongly curved. The thickness of it indicates that it was probably used a lot in digging, which would make sense in an animal that's largely relying on vegetation for food. Almost like a bird, isn't it?
When you're both concentrating very hard on a specific problem and you're coming at it from different angles, it's a result of that combination that you can really start putting things together. And that's how it's worked with McFarlane and I out here. We're able to put together things as a team in a way that we couldn't do separately.
All the fossils that can be dated are roughly the same age, about 125,000 years old. As they pore over the bones, a surprise turns up. In size, they vary wildly.
Aha! Piece of incisor. Partly preserved, just the enamel cap. This is of the larger size of Amblerisa. We found ones that are much smaller than this. We can compare it to this jaw found much earlier, and you can see that they match up very well in size. This one is clearly somewhat smaller. It's the amazing thing about this particular beast. There's fantastic range among individuals. We found teeth that are half this size.
Great.
Different sizes of teeth mean different sizes of rat. At its largest, Amblerisa was about the size of a bear. At its smallest, only the size of a wolf.
Okay.
This is the palate of Amblerisa, the upper jaw, and each one of these holes in life would have supported a tooth. This is a tooth of Amblerisa separately found. And the interesting thing here is that this tooth is obviously far too large to have ever been part of this particular animal, although it was found in the same cave and almost in the same place. This is another indication of the massive, massive size differences in Amblerisa populations.
Such different sizes over so short a time are a fluke of nature. Amblerisa, the beast with no predators, was adapting to some other threat. With nowhere to run, the rat was caught in a pitfall and trying to claw its way out. After an entire day of combing through the dirt of Pitchapple Hole, the fossil hunters faced the challenge of every creature before them: getting out. Climbing 70 feet down was unnerving. Climbing back up is exhausting. For Ross, the end of the day is the start of his worries.
Looking up from the bottom of Pitchapple, 50, 60, 70 feet to the top, the thing that went through my mind mostly was, having gotten down here, having found something, how am I going to get my fossils back up and my person?
After 12 hours of digging comes the labor of climbing. Sometimes it's too much.
I'm sorry. Go on.
Yep. How you doing?
You going back down?
You going down?
I just seem to get spooked at this point.
Okay. You wanna reverse?
I'm afraid I'm gonna have to.
No problem.
Ross escapes on his second try. Claire opts for the winch method.
Okay, how you doing?
Okay.
Caves are the only parts of the Earth's surface that are unexplored in a large degree at the present time, and which are accessible to people with reasonable budgets and skills. So the opportunity to explore in previously unknown caves is in itself, I think, quite a reward. I think both of our reactions to finding the first specimens was just one of vindication, because many people had suggested that it wouldn't be found.
That's great.
For the king rat of Anguilla, the island at last became a trap. 125,000 years ago, the Ice Age ended, and the ice caps melted. Within a century, the seas rose 20 feet. The rat struggled to adapt, but Anguilla was shrinking faster than Amblyrhiza. In a race between evolution and weather, the giant rat lost. The seas are still rising. Within the next century, global warming may submerge even more of Anguilla. Unlike Amblyrhiza, the inhabitants can fend for themselves on higher ground, instead of perishing like rats on a sinking ship.